recreating Florence Nightingale's Coxcombs with the Tidyverse. So I was lucky enough to enter and win the recent YSS competition, as Altea mentioned. And I'm a PhD student at the University of Limerick. So in my PhD, I do functional data analysis, but I'm also really interested in data visualization. So this is what I might look like in an ideal world. And I do a lot of my work in R for statistical computing. So might be a more accurate representation of myself. So my motivation to explore Nightingale's work came about over a month ago now, because I suppose in the current climate, data visualization is all around us. And it's on the front of newspapers, we have bar charts and line graphs where we'd have never seen them before. And it's really good because it's keeping us informed in what are strange and uncertain times. Well, most of the time. This is the infamous Fox News graph with the y-axis that jumps from 60 to 90 to 100 to 130. And I saw someone describe it on Twitter as a y-axis WHY question mark. I thought that was quite good. But I suppose because at this time last month, Nightingale's bicentenary was approaching, and as I said, we're being flooded with data visualization, I saw various sources pose the question, what would Nightingale think of today's visualization? Because she's known to most as the lady with the lamp or the founder of modern nursing, but she was a data visualization pioneer. So she used statistical diagrams to communicate messages for sanitary reform during and after the Crimean War. And these graphics, which you'll probably have seen and that I'll show you, they're very detailed, accurate, and aesthetically pleasing, but I think more importantly, they were topical and they conveyed a call to action. So they allowed her to purposefully and forcefully communicate her message. I like this quote. It says that she loved the data journalism we have today. I presume by that it's meant the powerful tools we have to create statistical graphics and the means by which we can communicate them, such as the internet. So it also says she'd hate some of the ways that data are and have been abused. And I think I've shown you an example of one such abuse already in the previous slide. So my goal was to explore Nightingale's amazing work and see could they be recreated with the tools that we have today. So for me, this was ggplot2, which is a statistical graphics package in R, and that's part of a wider ecosystem of packages called the Tidyverse. So the reason I chose ggplot2 to do this work was first and foremost because it's what I'm used to and what I work with from day to day. And I think that's probably most important for anyone. But also it's based on a deep underlying grammar of graphics. And a grammar is just a set of rules or principles that governs an art or a science. And when Hadley Wickham developed ggplot2, it was an implementation and building on earlier work by Wilkinson and others, which aimed to develop a grammar for graphics. So this layered approach to a grammar of graphics allows us to create the statistical graphics that we want at a high level of abstraction. This is quite a high level diagram of the components that make up a statistical graphic. And I'm not going to discuss them in detail here. Rather, I'll just show them and how they make up Nightingale's graphics in the next few slides. And I briefly mentioned the Tidyverse 2, which is what ggplot's part of. It's an ecosystem of R packages designed for data science. And they all share an underlying design philosophy, grammar, and data structures. And this might sound a bit daunting if you haven't heard it before, but basically they all revolve around the same principle of organizing your data well, which is called tidy data. dplyr is one of the packages in the Tidyverse, and I've just put it here because I found it particularly useful creating Nightingale's graphics. It's a grammar of data manipulation. So basically the functions in the package are a set of verbs that allow us to manipulate our data. So the first diagram, which I'm going to show you code and talk you through making up is the polar area diagram. And it's perhaps Nightingale's most famous diagram, also referred to as the rose diagram or the wedges diagram or chart. I've seen it referred to as a coxcomb, which is not entirely correct, I believe. I believe that Nightingale referred to groups or collections of her statistical graphics as coxcombs. So maybe we could liken a coxcomb to a modern day infographic where we put together or collate our statistical graphics and tables. So the polar area diagram shows the mortality rates in the British Army during the Crimean War. This lasted for 2 years, and data on the first year is presented on the right-hand side, and in the second year, after there was sanitation introduced, is shown on the second year, on the left-hand side. And the area of each wedge shows the death rate per 1,000 soldiers in each of the months during the war. And I'm just going to show you briefly how we can start by recreating the right-hand diagram and then build it up to create the diagram as a whole. So we're very lucky that the data is actually loaded into the HIST data package in R, and each row represents a month of the Crimean War. So if we're recreating the right-hand diagram, we only need up to and including March of 1855, which is the first year of the war. We create a new variable called death rate, because this is going to be what's on the area of the wedges, and it's the sum of the rates of death due to disease, wounds, and other causes. We also might have seen the labels used the year and the month name for some months, and just the month name in capital letters for other months. So we create a new variable which will be on the label. Now we have the most basic component of our plot ready, and we can call a plot and start to add layers. The first thing I'll do is specify some default aesthetics. So aesthetics are something that are mapped from columns of our data, or variables of our data, to something which we can perceive on the plot. So here it's position in terms of our coordinate system, but this could also be shape, color, or even size. So X and Y are slightly misleading here because ggplot's default is a Cartesian coordinate system, and polar area charts, not surprisingly, are in polar coordinates. So we can think of these maybe as aesthetic 1 and aesthetic 2, where X, when I change coordinate system, will later be mapped to the angle, theta. So this will be the month or the date. And Y, which I specified here as the square root of the death rate, will be mapped to the radius or the radial line. Now, I've chosen Y as the square root of the death rate. This transformation is because, well, I want the area to be proportional to the death rate. So therefore the radius, which is proportional to the square root of the area, should be proportional to the square root of the death rate. So now I can start adding my first layer, and this is a geometric object, a bar. So the polar coordinate chart is a bar chart in Cartesian coordinates, switched to polar coordinates. So here what I've done is the width of all the bars are equal and there's no spaces between them. This ensures that when we move to polar coordinate system, there's no gaps between the bars and each month has an equal angle. So that's our first layer, and the geometric object of our main layer is usually what sets the plot apart. Here we chose a bar or an area, but other plots might use points or lines. And we can adjust the theme and center it a bit more and add more layers. These would be different geometric objects, so we can add text, and they can inherit our default aesthetics, but they can also map other columns of the data. Here I've mapped the label column, which I showed you I made, and we can actually annotate the death rate onto the plot as well. We can add a constant line, so we can compare with the mortality rate of Manchester, which was at that time the most unhealthy town in England and in the UK. And we can add a subtitle in HTML, which using the GG text package, we can make into a nice, pretty subtitle. We can add further annotations to get back to Nightingale's polar area diagram. So that was a reconstruction of the right-hand side, but we can use the same principles to create the whole chart. The only difference really is that we will do what's called faceting. So we create small multiples of the same plot on subsets of our data. Here the subsets are the right hand side is the first year of the war and the left hand side is the second year. And we follow the same step-by-step procedure to build back up the plot that Nightingale had. So there's reconstruction, and it's quite close. And I think the layered approach does really well to replicate this diagram. The second diagram I'm going to show you how to do is the lines diagram. It's probably Nightingale's second most famous diagram, and it's personally my favorite. The lines show the mortality rates of the army and the civil population at different age groups. I've shown you in this fashion just so you can make this chart with any life table that contains information on two groups of lives. So we have the amount of living and dying both in the civil population and the British Army, and we can calculate a mortality rate and assign each age to an age group. Drop the variables we don't need, and we can do what's called melting the data down. It's kind of reshaping the data to long form. So instead of having two variables representing the rate in the army and the civil population, we have one specifying the group and one specifying the mortality rate. We can group these by the age group and the group which I've just mentioned and calculate the mortality rate in each grouping. We can, again, like in our last plot, we can create a label column that can be mapped onto our plot, and we're ready to go. Again, we have the same most basic component of the data, which is the data. So again, we'll create a bar chart. This time we have a two-color bar chart like we see a lot of the time, and we changed the default color scheme. Now, this, I suspect, was intentional choice of color scheme by Nightingale, with red possibly representing the death and blood and the high mortality rate of the British Army. And instead of a full coordinate transformation or transformation of the coordinate system, we just flip our coordinates, mapping x to y and y to x to get our horizontal bar chart. We go through this iterative step-by-step approach to build back up the plot that we want until we get to this really, really powerful plot that Nightingale had. So I think there are quite successful reconstructions of what were very old statistical diagrams. And I learned a few things, firstly, about the ggplot package and the grammar graphics. The layered approach does exactly what I think it was set out to do. It allows us to build layer by layer the plot that we want, and then that meant it allows us to embed Nightingale's level of detail in our graphics. Likewise, the grammar graphics can reveal unexpected connections between seemingly different graphics. I'm not so sure that they're definitely unexpected, but it really shows how the bar chart and the polar area chart follow the same idea in different coordinate systems. More importantly, I think, is what we can learn from Nightingale. And the first would be her data. So the data in the first plot was transcribed by somebody else, and in the for the second plot was transcribed by myself. And this was transcribed from her published works, and her data in the published works were perfectly organized on what we would call tidy. So I believe that the beautiful diagrams that she did make were just a small component or a byproduct of her overall good statistical thinking. I think she had a very clear vision of how data should be stored, collected, and analysed, and it's similar to what we preach today. And this second point on reproducibility, I don't think I need to go too much into it. It speaks for itself. 160 years later, we can recreate her diagrams from scratch. They're entirely reproducible. And finally, this is one point that I have not seen mentioned in many of the talks about Nightingale's graphics, and I think it's really important. In the current climate where there's rates and parameters being discussed in the media, I think Nightingale's annotations and the level of detail she embedded in them are a perfect exemplar for science communication today. So as statisticians and scientists, we're often told to communicate our risks and our rates in terms of people so that we can communicate them to the general public. And Nightingale did exactly this. If we see here, she says each of the 200 small parallelograms represents 1,000 men. In the other one, where the text is a bit smaller, it says out of 10,000 soldiers at the age of 20, 7,000 are living and 3,000 are dead at the age of 40. So what Nightingale did there is not only did she show the concepts in the diagrams really well, she accompanied them with annotations that made them communicable to a lay audience. So I'd just like to finish by saying I hope I've shown you kind of how Nightingale's graphics can be constructed grammatically like sentences, and how the important components are like words. I hope I've shown you this in kind of a tutorial style so you can reconstruct them yourself. But I'd just like to acknowledge how well she wrote these graphical sentences. I think Nightingale wrote brilliantly, and I think the biggest testament to this is the lives she saved and the people she continues to touch today. So I'd welcome any questions you have, and I'd like to thank you all again for listening.
Thank you very much, Edward. That was fascinating, and I really love the way you explained the whole process. So thanks very much. Are there any questions? I don't see any questions at the moment. Oh, yes, you have a question. Do you want to read them yourself, or do you want me to read them for you? Edward, will you want me to read them from the chat, or you want to read them?
Can you read them, please? I'm in a different window at the moment.
Yeah, of course. So first is by Patricas Fultinevicius. He's asking about reproducibility. Do you have any recommendations on how to distribute the data and the code underlying the graphics? There are solutions like Jupyter Notebooks and R varieties, but these are very difficult to implement in perhaps outdated academic fields.
Okay, so in terms of reproducibility nowadays, is it? Sorry.
Yes.
I suppose, yeah, that's one thing I wrote all these slides in R Markdown, and I have a reproducibility receipt here. So all the graphics that I've used, the way I work is with GitHub. So I have a GitHub repository for the work I do on this. I push all my code and my slides to Git so that all my work is entirely reproducible. And so if anyone does want to look at how the slides were generated or the plots were generated, all this is here. In terms of overall reproducibility, I suppose I work with Git, and there's a nice Git interface in RStudio, which makes it really easy to work with. And I haven't worked in Python quite a lot, so I'm not sure it's the same kind of idea available for Jupyter Notebooks, but I find that GitHub is really, really useful for me anyway.
That's great, thank you. Then there's another question. Yeah, there's comments on how great it is that you are so transparent and that you are really going. I will actually share the link to his GitHub on our Twitter, so you can all have it available. And Dr. Lorna also asked, how long has it taken you to develop your code?
Okay, so I suppose I'll tell you, when did the Nightingale competition start running? Was it around the start of May?
Yeah, fortnight or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose so. I was actually at a webinar about a week before that, so around the end of April, and the speaker kind of posed the question. She asked, what would Nightingale think of today's data visualization? So I did start doing a bit of reading at that stage, but actually once I got into recreating the graphics, it didn't take that long. And I think the reason being is what I described there about the unexpected connections between the graphics. I'm quite used to making bar charts for my own work in R, say. And I think once you start to read a bit and understand the grammar component of the graphics, a simple change of coordinate system was actually quite quick then to understand how the polar area chart worked. And then obviously, like everything, you could waste a lot of time finishing and putting annotations and what they call bells and whistles on the plots. And I suppose that did take a bit of time. But I think the overall reproduction of the diagrams didn't take too long, maybe a couple of days.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for that. We don't have time for more questions, but that was really fascinating. And thank you for your time. So I'll pass on to David, who will introduce our next speaker. If you would like to answer your screen, that would be great. Thank you, Heather.
Hi, everyone. So before I introduce Marion, I'd just like to say a few words about the Royal Statistical Society. So for those of you who don't know about the RSS, it's a professional body that promotes the importance of statistics and data. And there are currently over around 9,000 members worldwide. And if you're a student in full-time education, or you're completing a full-time or part-time PhD, they offer free membership to you if you've got an interest in statistics and data science. Membership will also allow you to join the Young Statisticians section. And the aim of that is to unite statisticians who are in the early stages of their careers. And the YSS, they run regular meetings and fun social events throughout the year. And they've got a massive presence at the annual RSS conference. I was a member of the YSS committee for a couple of years until I became a non-young statistician. And Althea now has taken over from me. She's a member of the committee, and so she may be able to tell you more about it if you have any questions. And there's all our details on how to join the RSS on the RSS website, which is just rss.org.uk. And finally, the RSS have a number of local groups throughout the UK which organise statistical events. In fact, this particular event that you've attended today has been organised by us in the Highlands local group, together with University of Aberdeen and Biostatistics Scotland. And if you'd like to join the Highlands local group or any other local group in the UK, you can join their emailing lists to be notified of forthcoming events, and you can sign up again through the RSS website, and you don't have to be a member. Finally, just one big piece of exciting news to share is that the RSS conference is actually coming to Aberdeen in 2022. So we hope that you will consider to be a part of that. Perhaps you'll submit an abstract of your work or just attend. Okay, so it's now my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Marion Campbell. Marion graduated with an honours degree in statistics from the University of Aberdeen and subsequently graduated with a PhD in public health. She then joined the University of Aberdeen's Health Services Research Unit in 1993 and became director of the unit 14 years later. Then in 2015, Marion became Dean of Research for Life Sciences and Medicine at the University of Aberdeen before becoming Vice Principal of Research in October 2017. And I'll now hand you over to Marion.
Well, thanks very much, David. I was trying to pretend I was still young, but now you've said I've spent all these years, I'm clearly not young, so I can't pretend anymore. But just delighted to be able to be with you today. I unfortunately couldn't manage to be with you for the whole of the day, but I think I can hear from the attendees that you've had a very interesting day, very interesting number of sessions, and I'm sure you all enjoyed it. So as David mentioned, I am a statistician myself, and so for me it's really, really important and an honour to be part of an event that really celebrates stats techniques. I no longer am able to crunch numbers and produce graphs really myself. So, you know, for me, it's a real delight to be able to support and come and, you know, share this day with you. What I did do was I didn't manage to listen into the presentations, but I did go through all the abstracts. And I was really impressed by the breadth and the depth of the stats techniques that are being adopted, you know, across a spectrum of domains, from health to biology to fisheries. And it really showed to me the depth and how statistics really is in everything we do, and how that clarity of thought and clarity of vision and clarity of visualization is so important to really the breadth of research that we do in this university and beyond. I'm also delighted that I come in to do the exciting bits and the fun bits towards the end of the symposium. And it's really nice to be able to set aside a little bit of time to celebrate at the end of a symposium, to celebrate the contributions of everybody. And I think I'm also particularly delighted that we're taking time to celebrate and award a specific award for best visualization, because obviously Florence Nightingale, that was part of her really key part of her career, was being able to explain to all those health policymakers, as they were in the day, about her work. And I think you know, also as part of this COVID crisis that we're in at the minute, I think probably all of you who have watched the news, have watched anything, it's really outlined to all of us the power of data visualization. And it's so important to all of us who use stats techniques and modeling and so on, that we can express our results and express our findings in a way that's meaningful to the public, so that people can understand and connect with what we do. So I think it's hugely important for us, as we're doing very complicated things, just to keep that in mind at the end of the day. Is it really is pointless if we cannot share it with others, the meaning of what we do. So as you know, I'm here to announce the winners, but before I go into that sort of final piece, I want to just formally thank all those who've been arranging this day. These things never happen without a lot of work in the background, and really I want to particularly thank Althea and David in particular for all the work they've done, and I'm sure there's been a small army of workers and helpers working behind you. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge that, and this is where meeting face to face, we miss it, because this is where we'd all do a round of applause. But I'm not sure how we can do that virtually, but just be aware that it's there. So I think all of us really want to thank you for your time organising this. Okay, so really you don't want to hear me drone on. You want to hear about who has been awarded the best presentation and the best data visualisation. So again, it would be really nice to have a drum roll here, and I'm not actually quite sure how we plan to do this, but I think it'd be really nice if, when I actually announce, you know, who has won the award, that the person can actually flash themselves back up on the screen so that we can publicly acknowledge your work. So, right, without further ado then, we need to present. So I will go to best presentation first. And the best presentation, and the feedback for this was, and I'm going to read it off my sheet, this was an all-round nice and clear talk from initial concept all the way through to current applications, with very interesting statistics along the way. And so the winner of best presentation is, drumroll, Petrikas Pultinuvicius, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. And this is for his talk on cell line generation for efficient exogenous protein production. So I don't know if Petrikas, There you go. Well done. Yeah, a clap, clap, clap on the sides. Just great stuff. So again, quite clear that statistics is used in a very wide field, and delighted that you've won that award. Now, David, I should probably ask you, is Patrika's going to get a certificate, or how is this actually going to be recognised? Oh yes, I'll be sending you by email a electronic voucher for £30 to spend on Amazon. Perfect.
Thank you.
Everything's electronic these days, including the prize. Super. Anyway, fantastic work and well done for that. Okay, so then we'll move on to the second award. And the second award is for the best visualization. And here, the feedback that in this person's talk, they had the most effective and impactful visualization of the day. And the winner of that award is Davina Derris for her talk on what is the healthy dolphin, better understanding of cetacean energy metabolism by using an untargeted plasma metabolomics approach. So well done, Davina. Is Davina still on the call?
But my camera is off for internet reasons, so thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you anyway. You're there, so well done for that. And again, David, can you sort of share with the group what Davina will get for this? Yeah, again, that'll be a £20 Amazon voucher to spend on whatever you wish on Amazon.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much.
That's right. I'll email that to you just after this event.
And I believe you'll also get the wonderful data visualization sort of badge for Florence Nightingale. Is that correct?
That's true. Yeah, that's correct. Yes, Altea, I think everyone will get a badge actually who presented. So
even better, even better. So a little memento of your day. So really, in closing, I think what I want to say is, Vice Principal for Research, but also a lifelong statistician. Keep up the good work. It is wonderful to see all our statistical techniques being used and adopted in, everyday problems. And keep promoting the wonderful world of statistics, but also I think it really is keep on ensuring that we're able to translate and explain our results to researchers, to policymakers and to the public, because that's the way we'll make a real difference. And I'll stop there. David, anything from you to finish off housekeeping wise or otherwise?
Well, just to say thanks very much, Marion, for a very inspiring speech. And I think Lorna wants to say a few words of thanks as well as chair of the Highlands local group.
Perfect.
Is Lorna there?
Yes, hello, hi. I just wanted to say, to wind up, and to particularly, as Marion said, to thank the team who've really worked ever so hard to get this together, and particularly Altea, who's really sort of pulled the event out of the hat. The format of the day should have been a full day with longer talks, with posters and breakout sessions and networking, and it, to be honest, was very nearly cancelled, but they turned it around. And within a very short time period, we came up with this current format that maintained our two plenary speakers. I really like the rapid fire sessions. I think they've worked really well, and they've given a good number of young researchers an opportunity to share their work with us. I think the participants have been fantastic. They've come from all over the place, not just the Highlands, but Scotland and indeed England. And of course, we've got our Irish Republic, Edward, who came along to do our wonderful talk on Florence Nightingale. Now, I was going to share a little picture if I can. I don't know if this is going to work, but here we go. So it was really just to say a big thank you to everybody. And to look forward to, especially thanks to our non-statistician, our unyoung statistician, David, who is our secretary, who's really worked very hard with the team to get this event onto this format today. And our external speakers, Adrian Bowman from Glasgow, Cornelia from St Andrews, and obviously Edward from Limerick. And thank you ever so much, Marion, for coming in and giving us those words of encouragement. But in particular, I want to thank all of those who've joined us today, and we really look forward to seeing you sometime live in the future, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for future events. I think that's all I want to say, so thanks ever so much.
Thanks very much, Lorna. I don't know if you want to bring on Altea just to say goodbye to everyone.
Okay, well, yeah, I will just echo what they all said. Yeah, I'm just very grateful for all your time, all your fascinating talks, and all the support I've gotten from all the organizing committee and Lorna in particular. Yeah, so it's been fantastic, and thank you very much, and hope to get to see you all very soon in person.
Round of applause. Thank you.
Bye bye. I'll hang up then.